Last month on a family holiday, I did a little experiment. I had my iPhone as usual, but I also brought with me an Oppo Find X9 Ultra to take photos with. And I ended up so blown away by this phone in more ways than one that I had an entire midlife crisis. I made every arrangement to finally put my iPhone to rest the moment I got home and escape from the Apple ecosystem once and for all. That was a giant mistake. So I started this holiday with a very simple mission. Anytime I was going to take a photo on my iPhone anyways, I'd just take one on the Oppo too. What I didn't expect though is how much fun this was going to be. It got me thinking, the iPhone's camera system is kind of designed to be boring. Apple sells over 200 million iPhones every single year, and that's between not very many different models. So just because this one has a Pro in its name does not change the fact that it's designed for a mainstream audience. What does a mainstream audience need? Balance. Every aspect of the iPhone, including its cameras, is meticulously crafted around a never too much, never too little Goldilocks philosophy, because that's the only way to make a one-size-fits-most device. Something for which it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter which lens you're using, it doesn't matter what lighting condition, front camera, back camera, you just know that it's going to be dependable, if not exciting. And so what I noticed was, as soon as I started using this tool that instead of being reliably good, was capable of exceptional, it all of a sudden made me care about what I was shooting again. Like this shot here, taken on the Oppo phone. It started to become a bit of a game on this holiday. I'd take these photos on both phones, and every time I'd show my family, it was the difference between, thanks for taking the photos with the iPhone, and wow, you're such a good photographer with the Oppo. They stoked my ego, and that's the quickest way to my heart. And after a few days of this, I started to realize there was no point taking photos on the iPhone if I had this Oppo around, so I just focused on using this. I started to play around with what was possible thanks to the Oppo's higher number of cameras, much bigger sensors, higher resolutions, and wider apertures to let more light in. I was taking stunning footage like this, which, let's be honest, was just never going to happen before. Not to mention this 10 times optical zoom camera that can go a lot further than that and feels borderline violating. You're taking shots that look like this, only to completely forget that this is how far away you shot them from. And the 6 times zoom preset that produces my absolute favorite close-up macro shots of any phone ever. And so you can imagine at this point, having gone from son who owns lots of phones to son who actually takes such good photos that he must take ours too, I started to wonder, why am I even using this iPhone? Why am I not using a phone that's tailored to what I love and just permanently aura farming with every clip I take? Plus, I actually capture content for a living, so wouldn't switching to something with crazy good cameras, and by the way, a battery that's nearly 50% larger too, actually just be a work perk as well as a life one? And what's intensified this feeling is the sheer gap in intelligence that I've noticed between the two phones. For example, I'm someone who strongly prefers to talk things out instead of typing. I like getting my thoughts out quickly, it just feels efficient. Plus, I get a lot of finger pain when I spend too much time on a keyboard. So on my iPhone, I'm constantly setting reminders using my voice, using dictation to give big chunks of feedback to my editors, or even when on a walk, where I always seem to have my best ideas, brain dumping into my notes app as new things occur to me. Problem is, Apple kinda sucks for this. And it's only when you live with both Siri and Gemini at the same time that it dawns on you how much better an Android phone right now understands what you're saying to it. Gemini's not perfect, but it does get the words right, and you have way more control over the grammar too. So you end up with sentences that you could actually send to someone without looking like you learned English yesterday. Plus, Google specifically just announced that they are doubling down on their speech-to-text quality later this year with the new Rambler feature. That's me. I'm that Rambler.
Yeah, can confirm.
And with reminders, I just kind of come to expect that if I ask Siri to remind me of something, it's going to completely butcher it. But that is now tomorrow's problem to figure out what I originally meant. It's been so refreshing for this to not be an issue with the Oppo. Or another example, let's say I'm in Saley, I'm buying an eSIM for my next trip. Kyrgyzstan. Oh my god. The Android gets me, iPhone not so much. Point being, there are all sorts of benefits that you start to notice from the lurking presence of a higher intelligence on Android. Like yesterday, I was searching for a specific photo of Drisha and I. Being able to just type something vague like couple and trust that your phone actually gets that you mean 2 adults, maybe a baby, nothing more, is so useful. Now, of course, Apple will get smarter software and a better Siri. Probably soon. They have to announce big changes at this year's WWDC. They will make iPhones with better cameras and longer battery life. But my thought process was, it could be months or even years before this better Siri and better software is actually on my iPhone and working well. And by then, will Google and Gemini be just as far ahead? It certainly seems that way based on the mountain of upcoming features announced at Google I/O. And frankly, I don't think Apple is ever going to close this camera and battery size gap. It doesn't make sense for them to because of the Goldilocks zone that they need to stay in to remain mainstream. So I dove in. I went through every single app I use on my iPhone and downloaded them one by one again. I painfully peeled away like 16 years worth of photos from iCloud and started paying for Google Photos. Called my banks to re-authenticate my cards for Google Pay. Re-logged into every single account and created new ones for those that I'd initially foolishly signed up for with Apple. Damn you guys for making it so easy to do that. This process was a reminder of just how locked into the Apple ecosystem you can become without really realizing it's happening. And that's without even talking about the whole shared iCloud library and iMessage stuff. Thankfully in the UK, most people just use WhatsApp. It's things like, if I want to keep using my AirPods with this Oppo, I'd lose about 10 of their key features, like whatever I'm watching, pausing when I take one earbud out. How with the iPhone, you can actually use the microphones inside of your AirPods as a portable lav mic to pick up your voice a lot clearer when you're taking video. And it makes a massive difference, as you can see, as we now flick to using the iPhone's inbuilt microphones. And probably the most useful, audio sharing. So both Drisha and I can both connect our pairs of AirPods to one phone. None of this is possible on the Oppo, at least on Oppo's current latest software. My MacBook would lose the ability to instantly paste something the moment that I've hit copy on my iPhone, and being able to use my phone's internet with just one tap from my Mac, as opposed to needing to go onto the phone first to activate hotspot, and then back onto the phone to turn off hotspot when I'm done. Not to mention the most painful loss of all, AirDrop. And then my Apple Watch, that would be literally dead on arrival. This will not even pair to an Android phone, which is really upsetting given that this played such a core role in my recent fitness transformation. I was determined though, so one by one I found the best current workaround for each potential issue, and I am 7 days into this being my main phone with my main SIM card in. And I screwed up. Now, of course, not everything I found is going to be an issue for everyone, but I just want to show you why this switch was such a bad idea for me, in case you see parallels with your situation. So first, there's definitely some nitpicks that have crept in about this Oppo, things you don't realize when you're in the honeymoon phase. Like, for example, when you're buying a niche phone like this, it's really hard to get quality accessories. Like on my iPhone, not an ad by the way, I love my Taurus brand case with this fancy stand. This is the best alternative I managed to find on my Oppo. It sounds absolutely atrocious when you rotate it, and literally just yesterday while using it, the backplate fell off. Yeah, this ain't it, Chief. The Oppo regularly takes an extra second or two to figure out what app you're looking for in the universal search bar. So while I'm used to bashing in 3 letters and then instantly hitting the app icon I want, here, unless you wait, you actually end up going into the wrong apps. The apps themselves on Android do not feel as polished. Like, why with Uber does it feel like the categories are actually measured to fit within my display on the iPhone, but on Android I have to scroll? Why is the Boots logo every time I open the app high resolution on iPhone, but low resolution on Android? Why does NYT Games on iPhone get this custom fancy dock at the bottom, while Android gets this animationless, personalityless alternative? Why does the British Airways app on iPhone remember who I am, but on Android it makes me log in again every single time I open it? Why on Google's own YouTube Studio is the app better formatted to read your titles on iPhone, even though Oppo is set to minimum text font? And why does Android take me to the bottom of the page every time I switch views? These are all minor things that you could get used to. But I think anyone switching from iPhone to Android will notice their apps go from clearly the developer's first priority to, it works. I've started to notice that Oppo's display is not as bright as the iPhone's. Kind of ironic, given that its quoted brightness is actually higher. And you know when those SMS verification codes come in, I've got very used to them consistently appearing on my keyboard so that all I need to do is tap. Half the time on the Oppo, they just don't. All of these things, I would class them as irritating but tolerable. This, though, is where this transition started to break down for me. There's still no good alternative to AirDrop. It's pretty clear that Google's working on it, and very impressive that they've already got to a stage where they've reverse-engineered AirDrop to make new Android phones compatible with it. So I can now pull up a file on this Oppo and send it to my Mac via QuickShare, and my Mac will receive that file as if it were from an iPhone using AirDrop. It is seamless, but it's much slower on Android than when you're doing apples to apples. There's another popular option called local send, but it's buggier and just fails for no apparent reason a third of the time. I feel like I've gone through every single recommended option. They're either slow, unreliable, or filled with ads. So I'm back to QuickShare. It's the best option, but you can also see how potentially quadrupling the amount of time I'm waiting for my files to transfer doesn't feel like a sensible life decision. Of course, I could just ditch the MacBook 2 and go Windows, but as a general purpose laptop, I will die on this hill. Nothing beats the MacBook right now. I've realized another pretty fatal flaw in my plan. So obviously a big part of the reason that I shifted from iPhone to Oppo was the rear cameras. But in doing so, I also kind of just assumed that the front camera would be as good as the iPhone's. It isn't. And that's kind of annoying because half the time when I'm filming shots on my phone, it's because I don't have a camera person with me, and so I need to see what I'm doing. You know how we talked about this idea of the iPhone being such a balanced phone, and then me proceeding to say that that doesn't matter to me? Well, now's kind of where I eat my own words, because I think it does. I actually think there's something very nice and useful about having this parity on all of your cameras, because when I'm shooting clips on my phone, if I'm being really honest, I want it to look nice, but the most important thing is that it doesn't look bad. And so which phone allows me to better ensure that? That's actually the iPhone. It's not looking good, but this has been the most critical blocker for me. So switching out the earbuds has been fine. If anything, I've upgraded from the AirPods Pro 3 to the Sony XM6s, and I love these things, but it's having to swap the watch that's become a problem. At the start of this search, I was excited by the idea, because the Apple Watch has its flaws. This switch up was my chance to fix them. But then I started to go through the options. I checked out Garmin smartwatches, but their user interface is so laggy and unpolished. There's the Google Pixel Watch, but after I tested it at the Sidemen charity match and it claimed that I'd burned over 2,000 calories in 2 hours, I don't have a lot of faith that I could rely on it, especially since calories are one of the very few things that I need from my watch. There's the Oppo watches. You know, in theory, those should have very good synergy with the Oppo smartphone. But wait, no one uses this product. Literally, there isn't one review on Amazon UK, so there's just no way that this watch is going to be well supported within third-party fitness apps and on gym equipment, a function which I use all the time, by the way, to make sure that I'm getting the stats from both the watch sensors, but also the settings of the machine, so you get the most accurate results. The Whoop Band seemed promising. I know enthusiasts swear by it, so I went and bought one, set it up, used it for like 5 days, did not like it either. It's not that it's bad, it's just not for me. I have simple needs, and Whoop gives you so much information that sometimes actually comes at the cost of the clarity of the simple stuff. Not to mention how still having to wear something on your wrist without getting any of the perks of a smartwatch, like being able to set a quick reminder, see your heart rate, or hell, check the time, feels like such a waste for me. So eventually I caved. I sucked it up and bought the one smartwatch I'd been avoiding the whole time. The Galaxy Watch, the watch where they forgot that the screen was a circle when designing the body. And even this, it's not working out. While I am working out. See, for the first 3 months of this year, you might know, I used the Apple Watch to track a strict exercise plan, and the changes I saw in my body composition lined up almost perfectly with the calories that this watch said I was burning. And now, for the 30 days after that, I've been using the Apple Watch calorie numbers again to try and maintain the weight that I'm at. And so the fact that in that time, my weight hasn't gone up or down one bit shows that, while of course this is not lab-grade accuracy, calorie counting is a very weird, imprecise thing, it shows that it's accurate enough to be useful. But if that's the case, then this is not. Because every single day I've been wearing these two watches side by side, the Galaxy tells me that I've burned quite a lot more calories than the Apple says. And all of this is compounded by the extra issues I'm facing by straddling multiple ecosystems. I've already forfeited a lot of the Galaxy Watch's standout features by not using it with a Samsung phone, and it's not syncing very reliably at all with the Oppo. I got very used to how with the Apple Watch, as soon as your stats update on this, almost instantly they update on Apple Health, and then pretty much instantly they update on all your third-party apps connected to Apple Health. Not the case with my Samsung Oppo combo. Sometimes the Samsung Health data will update in real time. Like here it's telling me I've burned 49 calories, but then that number number doesn't translate to the app, which still thinks I've burned 11, until I manually pull down to refresh it, then it syncs up. Sometimes my widget will tell me I burned one number, but then I click into it and the app behind it says another. I feel like I've had every combination of this type of syncing issue. It's all technically working, it's just not working well together. And that's especially true when it comes to charging the stuff. I've got used to this super slimline thing being the only charger that I need to take with me when I'm going away. Now, my phone doesn't have a magnet. I mean, yes, you could add one with a phone case, but frankly, this magnet is so terrible that I kind of wish I hadn't tried. So I've just ended up plugging the thing in each night. The Samsung Watch has its own bespoke charging puck. And the Sony earbuds, you can charge them wirelessly, but they don't have a magnet like the AirPods do. And at the point where I'm charging both of my other products with wires anyway, I actually might as well just plug that in too. So basically, this jump to Android would mean that even my travel charging setup would deteriorate to this. Ultimately, too many compromises. I've been getting bored, right? I've been getting bored of iPhones every single year looking and feeling so similar. So when finally an Android phone came out that felt so far beyond my iPhone's capabilities, it triggered a tipping point. But while I was of course ready for some compromises to make this switch, I was not ready for just how impactful they'd end up feeling for the way that I use my devices. It's reminded me that even though many Apple devices individually are not necessarily best in class, the synergy that they form together, or the disguised lock-in, depends how you see it, actually is. And I'm currently getting more from that than individually upgrading any one piece of hardware. At least messing around with the eSIMs hasn't added to the headache. Because I use Saley, our sponsor, anytime I go away, the moment I logged into the app on my Oppo, I already had my data packages ready to go. And it's just sick how the next time I decide I want to gallivant off somewhere, I can just download the data for that country, like you're downloading an app. And you can get an exclusive 15% discount on Saley eSIM plans using the code BOSS at checkout.